I don't need to preach as a neurotypical to neurodivergence. I don't have anything to add there that's of value. But what I do have to add value is for the masses who are either oblivious and neurodiverse themselves and don't know it and think they're just bad humans, and or the people who are like me, who are neurotypical, for whom I'm walking around with all this wind in my back because the world was built for me and I don't even realize it.
Right.
The talk is for them to reframe what we see from how we diagnose it today because we're oblivious to another alternative for what might be going on.
Hey there, Vibers. Welcome to the Vibe with Kai podcast, where we keep it real, we keep it relatable, and we keep it a little bit funny as we dive into all things mental health, ADHD, and introversion. My name is Kai. I'm your host, and each week we're going to tackle life struggles with honesty, humor, and a whole lot of heart. So whether you're here for practical advice or a little validation or just a laugh about what life is like as an adult in today's world, listen, you are in the right place. We are not about toxic positivity here. We are all about being genuine to each other and to ourselves. And we're talking about real things. And we want to encourage each other and remind you that you are not alone. With that said, my friends, sit back, relax, and let's vibe through this together and enjoy today's episode of the Vibe with Kai podcast.
What's going on, Vibers? It's your boy, Kai. Welcome to another episode of the Vibe with Kai podcast. In today's episode, we're talking about something that hits close to home for many of us: why so many people struggle to, quote, get it together. My guest is Kristen Pressner, a global HR executive, TEDx speaker, and all-around powerhouse when it comes to shifting how we see ADHD and neurodivergence. She thought she understood ADHD until she realized her entire household was neurodivergent. We'll unpack what she learned, how we can stop mislabeling struggles as character flaws, and how neurotypicals can be a part of the solution. Get ready for some game-changing insights from my friend Kristen. I want to welcome her to the podcast. Hi, Kristen. Hello, welcome.
Kai, it's truly a pleasure to be here. Honestly, your podcast was a huge unlock for us in understanding what was going on.
I appreciate that. You know, like I was saying to you before we started recording, that this is one of those COVID podcasts that I felt like during COVID, everybody wanted to have a podcast, including myself. And so I started one, and actually this month, 5 years ago, is when it started. Now we're in season 6. So I appreciate it.
Well, congratulations. You can tell the good podcast by the ones that are celebrating their sixth
That's
season.
true. That's true. You could tell the ones that stuck with it, and it's grown a lot, you know, since then. I've met so many incredible people, such as yourself. It's just such a really cool thing to be able to meet people like you. Before we dive into your TEDx talk, if you don't mind, can you just share a little bit about yourself and what led you to become such a strong advocate for neurodivergent awareness?
Yeah, happy to. So, street cred wise, I'm a global human resources executive. I'm based in Switzerland, but I'm from the United States originally. And I have a big responsibility for a multi-billion-dollar organization, where you would naturally assume, at least I did, that I'm in the business of bringing out potential in people. So that's my superpower. It's why I get where I get my energy, and I'm actually really good at it.
That's
And I
why you were
found
asking me
myself,
those questions beforehand about what you can do to make me look good too before we start
yeah,
recording. I'm like, now it makes
yeah.
sense.
It's all adding up. Well, and it'll come full circle because at the end we'll talk about what I recommend through my learnings, and
Yeah.
it's in there as well. But what I have a large family. I'm a mother of 4 now adult children, and my husband. And it's funny you were talking about the COVID pandemic because right about that time my kids were kind of becoming young adults, and you start to do that, like they're becoming who they're becoming. And I started to observe in my own household that, to be blunt, it didn't seem like anyone else could get it together. Like,
Right.
you don't expect little children to get it together, but
Right.
12, 13, 14 and up,
Yeah.
I'm kind of waiting for the getting it together to happen. And then COVID kind of shined a light on it because then I was more in the house and looking around, and it removed some of the coping mechanisms as well. And ultimately, what I discovered was that every other person in my house, my husband and 4 children, are all neurodivergent. And I fancied myself someone who got it, someone who was an ally, neurodivergent friendly, who understood that it existed. But yet, right under my nose, I had misdiagnosed what I saw as character flaws, Why can't they get it together? What are they lazy? What's happening here that people who are obviously highly talented, ambitious, and have a lot of potential aren't making that materialize? Why are they making hard things easy and easy things hard? And so for me, this was the beginning of a real massive wake up call and awareness that I grabbed onto now with all of my heart.
Yes, and I love it. And it's I want to go back for a second because you mentioned your career in HR and leadership and like everything that goes there. And I'm curious, how did your professional background shape the way that you approach discovering neurodivergence in your own home?
Yeah. I mean, to be blunt, my professional background made me believe I was one of the good guys and one of the people who understand. And one of
Sure.
my humbling observations through this process was that I was among those who actually were quite oblivious and had a big misunderstanding. And, but my professional background of someone who's a potential maker caused me to try relentlessly to fix my family and make them like me. So everything I know about how to be successful, I jammed at them every different
Yeah.
direction in every different way. And they would emphatically agree. So they would say, yeah, that's really great stuff. I'm going to do that. I'm going to have a place for everything. I'm going to make good lists. I'm
Yeah.
going to, leave earlier. I'm going to do all these great hacks that you're suggesting, mom. And then they never did. And I honestly felt a bit like gaslit by my own family. Like, why are you wasting my time
Yeah.
asking me for help? I give you my wisdom. How lucky for you that you have a world
Right.
leading HR executive in your
Right.
house.
Yeah. We
And then
don't
they
all have
ignored
that.
me.
We
Yeah,
don't all have that in our homes. I just have
exactly.
two
Well, I can tell
cats.
you.
My
Yeah,
my cats are not HR executives, I can tell you that.
well, exactly. Well, I can tell you it wasn't a differentiator to have me in the house. In
Yeah.
fact, quite the
Right.
contrary, because I felt like I was relentlessly trying to help and it was going nowhere fast.
Right.
And so, how did I use my being an HR executive? Well, I relentlessly tried the wrong things on my family and it nearly broke them. And by that, I use the analogy of the children's toy where you put a plastic shape in a sphere. I kept jamming the triangle into this square slot, trying to make it fit. And if you push too hard, you will break the toy.
Right.
And there's a reason why there's a high correlation with things like ADHD and neurodiversity with what we would call in the healthcare business comorbidities like depression, anxiety, disordered eating, substance abuse. This isn't squirrel haha funny. This is potentially deadly.
Yes.
And for me, I realized that passionately, emphatically, relentlessly trying to help was making it worse.
Right, right. In your TEDx talk, which is titled "Why is it why is it that so many people can't get it together?" which I love, that has resonated with so many people. I'm curious, what was the initial spark that made you realize that you needed to share this story on a larger scale?
Yeah. So it took a while for me to stop trying to fix them and make them like me.
Right, right.
And there's more of them than there is of me. I have a big job. And
Yeah.
so I was trying to find that magic wand to fix them all so I could, at scale, put it behind me and move on. And in my mind's eye, I was thinking, wow, this is really a hard nut to crack. And as soon as I crack it, I'm going to share this with everyone so they
Right.
don't have to go through this horrible trial and error and, failing and maybe making it worse somehow. But it took me a long time to figure out how to crack the nut. And at the end of the day, once I learned how to crack the nut, which is in its essence, stop trying to make them more like me and set the conditions to enable their gifts and talents to have less wind in their face because the world isn't built for them. The world is built for me. If I could do that, suddenly I saw thriving, not just
Right.
surviving. Suddenly I saw the best coming out. And so my deal I made with myself was once I crack this nut, I'm going to shout it from the rooftops. And I'm definitely shouting it from the rooftops. And the best way I need to do that was together with my family to write and then do this TEDx talk. I delivered it. And it's not for people like you, Kai, who already get it. It's for the oblivious.
I'm working on it. I'm working on it. I try. It's still a
But
learning
I'm
process.
not
It's still
trying.
new to me.
Yeah, there's a mass misunderstanding about
Yeah.
what we observe and how we diagnose
Sure.
neurodiversity as character
Hmm.
flaws. And you already don't have that mass misunderstanding. And so when I ask myself, because I tend to think in systems and in scale, what would it take to move the needle here? I don't need to preach as a neurotypical to neurodivergence. I don't have anything to add there that's of value. But what I do have to add value is for the masses who are either oblivious and neurodiverse themselves and don't know it and think they're just bad humans, and or the people who are like me, who are neurotypical, for whom I'm walking around with all this wind in my back because the world was built for me and I don't even realize it. The talk is for them to reframe what we see from how we diagnose it today because we're oblivious to another alternative for what might be going on.
Right. In your TEDx talk, which by the way, for anybody that's listening right now, if you want to watch it, I'm going to include a link to it in the episode description of this podcast. So all you have to do is click to watch the whole thing. In this talk, Kristen, you describe a moment that changed everything for you when someone suggested ADHD. Can you just walk us through that realization and what it felt like to challenge your own assumptions?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to be honest here because there's a lot of humility in what I'm sharing.
Yeah.
The first time someone suggested we look at ADHD, I think I had what is probably the most common reaction of a neurotypical or someone who's in the oblivious category. I thought they were crazy. I mean, just think of how it's named. Attention deficit. No, they had tons of attention. Gosh.
Yeah.
Hyperactivity. No, it was a girl. It was a daughter. And so she wasn't hyperactive at all. The hyperactivity was internal.
Right.
Disorder. No, I've got kids who are gotten into Ivy League schools, who've done TEDx talks themselves, who graduated a year early. We're not talking about people here who are of a super low standard. And so that was where my first reaction was like, yeah, thanks for the feedback. I don't think so.
Yeah.
And then I was at a place where I was like, well, maybe I don't fully understand. So I started to pull the loose thread in the sweater. And then you realize that all the signs are there. But I also think the ADHD diagnosis community uses words I just didn't understand, because they're like, are they impulsive? And I didn't know what ways impulsive could manifest or what it might look like. Or do they lack executive functions or things like, well, we're talking about a 14-year-old. Like, what kind of executive functions do you expect her to have? And so I realized that there's language that gets used that keeps us from understanding one another. And so for me, I started to pull the loose thread in the sweater. And this is why I was sharing with you before we went live. You could go read a bunch of articles and they spoke in a language that didn't come home to me.
Right.
And so where I really found the help was in the ADHD influencer community, the memes, the descriptions of what it feels like. And then I was like, wait a minute, this looks really familiar. I thought my kids were super smart, which they are, and therefore couldn't have ADHD because they could do a term paper with a 12-hour marathon the night before with no breaks.
Right.
I thought it was a kind of hard way of working, but hey, everyone's got their own process.
Right.
What I realized is that kind of thing is the hallmark of a high IQ ADHDer, the ability to pull it out against the wire.
Sure.
And so I just realized then all of a sudden, it was like, putting on glasses for the first time and you realize I didn't know anything about what I was talking
about. Right. It's fun. I'm glad that you were talking about how there's like just miscommunication. There was a misunderstanding, right? Like we just did, because it's kind of like we were speaking two different languages. And you're somebody that has considered themselves just well informed, and so like I'm really curious. Like out of all of those things that you mentioned, what is the most surprising thing that you learned about ADHD and or neurodivergence that you had previously misunderstood?
Yeah, that is such a good question. That there is a biological thing that can cause the things that I observed, which was that it made it hard to do things that I find fairly easy. Listen, mundane adulting tasks, be on time, etc. There's a biological thing that makes that many, many times harder for other people than it is for me. So many times my kids would say, yeah, there were signs, there were glimmers when I look back. Mom, sometimes I feel like I have to read the same page over and over. Mom, when you're talking, I try to pay attention to you, but sometimes it's really hard. And I'm like, yeah, that happens to everyone sometimes. Here's some hacks for how to pay more attention, right? Always through the lens of my world experience. And what I do in the TEDx talk is show these kinds of things that are important, but not necessarily interesting. And that's an important distinction. Those kind of hurdles I can jump over pretty easily. But for instance, an ADHD, those hurdles are this tall and they're this big. They're just daunted by each one. And so for me, the big thing was this is biological. This is neurotransmitters. This is the prefrontal cortex. I don't feel like it. I have a hard time motivating myself.
Yeah. Is it so when like the listening to you describe this, and that's my cat, by the way, in the background that you
I know
see
your
making
cat's
an appearance.
adorable.
Yes, I have two cats. This is one of them. That's his spot. It's Burr. That's his
Oh,
spot.
he
Hi,
likes to be on
buddy.
screen. Hey, Bert.
Yes, he always makes a little cameo, and he thinks I'm talking at him now. Everything that you were just talking about just now, like it reminded me, like in your talk, you talk and you kind of mentioned it before, and I mentioned it in the intro, that you talk about how the world often misdiagnoses character flaws when it comes to neurodivergent individuals. Is that what you're talking about? Like what you just described, is that like kind of along the lines of what you're talking about? And or can you just like elaborate on some of the more common misconceptions and how it impacts people's lives?
Yeah. So, ish. So
Yeah.
at its core, we live in a neurotypical world, and I believe on the full breadth and continuum. I go off screen if my arms go far enough, but
Yeah.
in the full breadth and continuum of neurodifference, we have a very narrow standard of what we consider right and normal, and we can talk about that.
Yeah.
But what's expected within that range is for things to be orderly, dependable, and in control. And so, how does an ADHDer get seen? As the opposite, all over the place, inconsistent, and out of control is the world's observation. And by the way, for many, the self observation. And for me, from a diagnosis, misdiagnosis perspective, what causes that? Well, it's biological. If I had cancer, you wouldn't be like, could you try harder not to have cancer? But somehow it seems okay to continue. It's just so ingrained in our society and our minds that all of this is mind over matter. It's a question of whether or not you're dedicated or committed or willing or whatever. And what I really one of my favorite parts of the talk is where I take what we describe ADHDers as, which is negative through the lens of how we see the world, but all over the place can pivot, respond quickly, and embrace new ideas.
Right.
And inconsistent could become can focus on the sudden unexpected things, and
Right.
all over the place could become full of drive. When you describe it like that, that's wonderful. And when I
Right.
think about workplaces or schools or our society, we need more of that, not less.
Yes.
But
Yes.
we're living in a way where we're making it really, really hard for those people to shine their special gifts into the world because we're putting a round peg, triangle peg into a square
Yeah.
hole and it doesn't
Yeah.
fit.
Right. Right. A lot of, especially myself, a lot of neurodivergent people, we often feel dismissed, right, or invalidated by people who just don't get it, right? I want you to take a moment and just speak to the neurotypical people here who truly want to support their loved ones, but they're not sure where to start, right? What advice would you give to them right now?
Yeah. So the great news is there are a lot of people like that. And I think that typically a neurotypical person doesn't even realize maybe that what they're doing doesn't work or isn't helpful. And so I've coined the phrase brain friend, um, so that we can have a common language. And what it means at its core is, first of all, I realize that there is a biological difference that causes the things that I observe, this wind in the face that some of my counterparts, my family experiences. And I realize that what works for me isn't going to work for them, and that my experience of that thing is actually quite different for them. This is where you get the hard things were easy things were
Yeah.
hard.
Right. Right.
And so you would think about it, if some things are hard for me but easy for them, and some things are easy for me but hard for them, doesn't that sound like a really good match? Instead of an impossible problem to solve. And so where does the fix come from? This is to the neurotypicals out there. It comes from us realizing that we have wind in our back and realizing that there is invisible wind in the face of our colleagues. So what would we do about that? Well, I'm not suggesting you have to do something wildly unreasonable. But what I found is when I meet my children or my husband with a non-judgmental, curious, supportive, and caring lens and say, this thing seems hard. Would it be helpful if I did this to help? And there's no shame and there's no
Right.
judgment. There's no feeling bad that that thing is hard for me. For instance, maybe getting out the door on time is hard, or maybe finding things is hard, or whatever. Then, or maybe, procuring 3 meals a day is hard, then, or doing laundry, fill in the blank. I'm not judgy about that.
Right.
You tell me that's hard. And then I say, what can I do to help? And in my experience, it's a wildly small intervention that goes a super long way in helping them thrive. And
Right.
so why wouldn't I do that? Why? Because there's all those benefits that we just talked about that are sitting there on the table waiting. But right now they're held back by a lot of these colleagues having so much wind in their face. They're so tired of living in a
Right.
world that wasn't built for them. So why wouldn't we adapt that breadth of that spectrum and make the world a bit more livable for them?
You make it sound so easy, right? You know, like the way you describe it, like it makes so much sense, and you make it sound so easy, but it isn't, like, or it's right. I feel like there's this like huge like divide that like, again, to continue the phrase here, is people just don't get it, right? What do you think is the biggest roadblock from society, like the masses that you were talking about before? What is the biggest roadblock stopping them from fully embracing neurodivergent minds and dialogue?
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a good one. There's always if the problem is big enough and wily enough, like how do we solve world hunger? Then you
Right.
suddenly realize there's all these issues and it can't be solved.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I found myself there in this loop. And so I'm like, well, we throw up our hands, the world's broken. And the conclusion that I came to was the vast majority of people that I know would be beside themselves to know that this was happening and they were definitely not helping and
Right.
potentially hurting. Now, and I'm just trying to build a coalition of the willing and a phrase, because I think the brain friend phrase is important. We need common language. And so my kids will sometimes say, I just need a brain friend. That actually happened this morning in my house. Something was going on that my husband and I were like, I get it. And they were like, my
Right.
brain works differently and I just need a brain friend right now. And then I engage and I go, oh, okay. I don't have to get it.
Yeah.
But what would a brain friend do here in this situation? And so I just think that bit by bit, my mother has this saying, everyone does a little, so no one does a lot. And I love it, especially as a mother of 4 children.
Yeah.
If we all just did a little, if you talked about it before this began, I said, is there anything I can do to make you able to shine as much as possible? That didn't cost me anything.
Right.
And if there is something I can do in our interactions to help you shine, or at work, or in sports teams, or in scholastic settings, or whatever, like why wouldn't we all be doing this?
Sure.
Because I'm not suggesting that I have to stop. I have to do something that's sacrificial to me. It
Right.
isn't really, but I really, really, really think the unlock is the awareness. And I've had a number of people mention to me, even those who get it, those who aren't oblivious, fall into the trap daily of seeing the manifestations of neurodivergence as character flaws. It's very, very ingrained in our worldview. But if we could little by little rewire that and create micro opportunities where people feel like they start to be able to shine. And I do think the onus is on neurotypicals here, because we have wind in our back and we may not be aware of it. I really think we could start something that could scale and unleash all of this potential on the world. And from my perspective, the world needs it.
Yeah, I love the idea and the concept behind Brain Friend. Like, I love that. Can you like, we have an understanding of what it is now, but how can people start practicing that in their daily lives?
Yeah. Happy to share. So some concrete examples that I like to give are, for instance, we have someone in our house who probably wouldn't eat unless you put food in front of them.
Hmm.
And we don't even need to unpack why. And I grew up in a house where we would say, hey, if you get hungry enough, you'll eat.
Right.
And I resist the urge to say, if they get hungry enough, they'll eat. And I realized that for whatever reason, and it doesn't need to make sense to me, they forget to eat. So from time to time, we put food in front of them and encourage them to eat.
Yeah.
Is that a big, big, big ask from me? No. Do I notice massive rewards of not shaming that person for feeling bad that they don't remember to eat, or the massive rewards of them then being able to successful at the things only they can do with only their gifts and talents because they're fed? Yeah, I see that. And so some examples that we've had in our house, um, there can be like my husband has a really hard time deciding how to prioritize what he's going to do and can tend to
Sure.
get overwhelmed, common with ADHDers.
Mhm.
And he used to feel really bad about it. So he was the ADHD cliche of, buying planners or,
Sure.
feeling
Yeah.
bad when systems failed, elaborate systems failed.
Yeah.
And he now has a list of 5 ways to kind of organize himself, and he cycles through them because when one gets boring, he now doesn't feel
Okay.
awful that it fell
Mhm.
apart. He just says, aha, this one's gotten boring. Boring is my kryptonite. So now I'm just going to go to choice 4. And one of them, I kid you not, he'll make a list of 10 things he needs to do today. And he has a 20-sided dice. He throws the die and it tells him which one to do. And he doesn't have to invest his energetic cost in choosing and picking because that was training him. It gets him going. And another one is a neurotypical like me would often do the hardest thing first to get it out of the way.
Eat the
I
frog.
don't
Yeah.
in my house
Mhm.
find that eat the frog. Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't find that works. And so we aim to try to get started, do the teeniest, tiniest little thing first to try to get the dopamine going, to
Mhm.
get the momentum to keep going.
Right.
But the tricky bit of all of this is each of us has to know ourselves and under what conditions we shine the
Right.
best. My son was interviewing for a job and they were doing a wonderful job of aiming to be neurodivergent friendly. And they said, what would help you? Is it like a later start time? Is it, working from home? And he was like, no, please make me come to the office. I need the
Hmm.
structure.
Yes.
And I think this is the thing. You got to know thyself to
Yes.
have someone be able to meet you and be a brain friend. And
Hmm.
a lot of people don't know thyself. I work in human resources, and so I know
Yeah.
this. And so my advice to people who would wish they would have a partner who was more brain friendly would be you got to start with knowing yourself and
Yeah.
asking for what you need.
Right, right. Structure is really important. Like as you were mentioning that, I immediately thought about how I personally, there were times that, like during the last 5 years where I didn't have to go into the office. Like I could have worked from home, but I didn't because I'm like, no, I need to go into the office, and I was more productive in the office. I had to be there. I had to have that structure, and it really helped. And everything that you just described in the last like minute or so are things that I know I personally like I thought of like personally like little things that I personally have gone through. Even like the little dopamine hits that we get in the beginning of our day with like just accomplishing a task. Like I have my list. I do like the Eisenhower matrix, right? But um I that helps me prioritize things, but I always do like I have a list of tasks that I know are going to take me 5 or less minutes. I have like that list, and like just knocking those out immediately, it just helps so much. It just helps gets the ball rolling for me personally. And so like little things like that definitely help. It definitely comes into play. And I think the more people understand that those little tweaks can like do so much for us. Like,
Yeah,
oh my God, it can make or break our day.
yeah,
Completely
yeah,
make or break our day, just to kind of
exactly.
get it on the right foot.
Exactly.
Like,
And it's such an important thing because I think the oblivious or the neurotypical will first go to like, well, we can't all just do whatever everybody else needs. It would be anarchy. It would be crazy asks. And,
yeah.
I get asked this a lot at work, like what's reasonable and what's not. And, you know, insisting to work full time from Fiji is
Mm.
probably not something that we can accommodate for most
So
jobs.
I should rescind that request from
You
my
might
job.
need to rescind that
Okay.
request at your job.
All right.
However,
Fine.
saying, hey, we're open space, and we could debate the benefits of open space, but we're open space, and I'm easily distracted. And when I need to focus, I'm going to wear noise canceling headphones.
Mhm.
That's a no brainer thing for an employer to be able to offer. Or sometimes I need to structure my day to recover a bit from things that are higher energetic or higher
Yeah.
sensory cost. And so these kinds of things are actually quite small. And, it's like I have the picture in my talk of the hurdles. This is the size of the hurdles I have to jump over, and this is the size of the hurdles for the same thing that my family has to jump over. And when I think about it through that lens, like I wear glasses and no one at work would be like, how come Kristen gets to wear glasses?
Sure.
But
Yeah.
some of these minor accommodations in the workplace or schools or wherever, it's glasses for the brain. Why wouldn't we let people have the minor thing like glasses that enables their brain to do all of the stuff it's capable of?
Right, right. I love that. I went to a movie premiere for. I went to this movie. It was called Sensory Overload. It's on Hulu right now, and it's all about like just this like sensory things and all the issues that neurodivergent people have when it comes to just senses. And one of the great things that they had at that movie premiere was a sensory overload room where because it was like it was very busy, like there was a lot of people there, and like it's easy to get overwhelmed because there's music playing, you're surrounded by people, there's bright lights, all this stuff. But if you wanted to like escape for like a moment, they had a sensory overload room where the lights were turned off. It was very quiet. It was just like the perfect thing. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, wow, if like it didn't take much for them to just set aside a room for people like me that get overwhelmed with our senses sometimes. It didn't take much for them to
That's
make that
exactly the
happen.
point. This is it.
No, please, go ahead. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. You get making me
Yeah.
all excited. I'm talking over
Oh, no,
you.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
This is my point.
Yeah.
Like, if people could just watch what just happened,
Yes.
you didn't ask for working from Fiji full time.
Right.
It meant so much to you that in that environment, someone thought of your needs and created a space to
Yeah.
address them. That's the kind of thing that's brain friendly.
Hmm.
And it's
Yes.
not that big of a deal. And the
Yeah.
return, because I'm all about return on investment. I'm a businesswoman at heart.
Yeah.
The
I work in
return on
marketing, so
investment, you got
ROI,
me.
that's those are my
It's
terms.
huge. It's
Yeah.
huge. It's off the charts because again, what do when you flip it to the strengths that you get through neurodiversity, if you stop looking at it as not orderly, not dependable,
Yeah.
it's bringing that unique thinking that reveals hidden connections. It's being flexible and resilient and quick to master new things. And it's being intensely imaginative and creative. And I challenge any of us to think of what corner of our lives we don't need more of that.
Right. 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 I'm curious. What do you think workplaces, schools, communities, what do you think they need to change to unlock that kind of potential? Like I feel like it's not hard, but like I feel like just it's not being done or even thought of for a lot of people. Like what are some small things that workplaces and schools and communities can do?
Yeah, this is. I thought deep and hard about what did I want to do to share what happened in the Pressner house and what we learned so that it didn't
Yeah.
stay in the Pressner house. And I chose doing a TEDx talk on purpose because
Yeah.
I think it's an easy pill to swallow. It's less than 15 minutes. It's laid out very meticulously, and it's a little bit of a Trojan horse to worm its way into your brain
Yeah.
and get you thinking. And it's about a month old now, and all I can say is based on the reaction that I'm getting, it's working
Yeah.
because I've got so many people reaching out to me going, oh my goodness, I can't stop thinking about what I learned in that talk. And they need some place to process it or whatever. And so I know it's hard in workplaces. Again, I was in the oblivious and I thought I was part of the solution for a
Sure.
long time. And so I actually think that this worm in Trojan horse rewiring is the first thing that has to happen in a scaled way so that we have a collective and common understanding.
Right.
And then bit by bit, you can make workplaces see things differently. I was talking at my employers, the head of our neurodiversity organization, and he said 80% of his success or failure at work is down to his manager. So let that
Okay.
sink in,
Right.
especially out there if you're a leader. So the whole workplace might not be perfect, but anyone who's leading or in any type of leadership role can have 80% of the effect.
Right.
And again, he said, being a brain friend, be curious, be open to what I need, don't immediately shut it down, and don't be judgy because it may not ever make sense to you. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to make sense to me.
Right. Right. Some people argue that ADHD, neurodivergence in 2025, just nowadays in general, is being over diagnosed today. Like it's a trendy thing, and people are doing it just because it's cool, which blows my mind. Like because my God, no. For the people that think that, like, they might be sitting here listening to this, being like, "Why are we talking about this? This is not as big of a deal as people are making it out to be. It'll, in a couple of years, this trend will fade away. Everybody has ADHD now. Like, to the people that think that ADHD and just neurodivergence in general is just being overdiagnosed, what would you say to them?
Yeah, well, with one caveat that I'm not a doctor, but I do have my armchair PhD in this because I'm super passionate about it, and
Yeah,
anything I share will be based in science and able to be is the current thinking. So first of all, I hear the overdiagnosis bit and everyone's ADHD and everyone's whatever, and I would invite to consider what I call the dark side of ADHD, because I'm going to share some facts. And these were in my TEDx talk and were actually edited out of the final version that went online. And I understand why, because TED rules are such that in order to say something scientific, you have to possess the scientific credentials to say that, and I don't.
sure. Hmm.
But it doesn't make it not true.
Hmm.
An ADHD diagnosis will almost guarantee about an 80% chance of having one of these additional comorbidities as well: depression, anxiety, disordered eating, substance abuse. Comes with a 3 to 5 times the death by suicide rate,
Yeah.
and on average reduces lifespan by about a decade compared to neurotypical counterparts.
Hmm.
So it's not, and this is just mental health. The effects touch every corner of an ADHDer's life: physical health, mental health, relationships, education, and work. And so I guess help me understand why that would be something people would want to over diagnose.
Right.
And in many, many places in the world, it depends on where you sit, it takes years to get an ADHD diagnosis. Imagine the amount of suffering, and it takes years to get a diagnosis. One of my biggest frustrations, quite honestly, is I have means and I know how to navigate healthcare systems, and I'm a strong voice and an advocate for my family. And the process of understanding what was going on times five people and getting them and advocating to get them access to the care that they needed was awful.
Right.
And so I'm sure we could all point to a case where we feel like there might be overdiagnosis, but I actually personally believe that the diagnosis is because of increased awareness.
Right. Hearing you describe what they cut out and why from the TEDx talk, is that why? Because I know Dr. Russell Barkley, he gave your TEDx talk like a really glowing review, but he had noted that it didn't address comorbidities and medication, right? And now listening to you talk, I'm curious, was that an intentional choice? Uh, and what are your thoughts on including that in future discussions?
Yeah. So yeah, I was really touched by Dr. Barkley's shout out because, quite
Yeah.
honestly, the vast majority of what I know I've learned from him, and he's really quite the voice and the advocate for ADHD science and understanding and research and truth. And he's retired. He's doing this
Mhm.
because he's passionate about it.
Yeah.
And so it meant a lot to me, not just that someone of his credentials and stature would shout out my TEDx talk, but it proves my point that it's very
Right.
well researched and that I know what I'm
Mhm.
talking about.
Right.
And I understand that if I don't have the credentials, the rules are the rules. And so that's
Right.
absolutely fine. I was grateful that he noticed that himself. And he also pointed out that I was coming at it from the angle of my home and workplaces and my
Yeah.
observations to share with the world. And so I would never go out on and say who should get medication or not, or how much
Sure.
medication should be a part of the solution, because I'm not credentialed to do that.
Right.
I could tell, I know what we've chosen in our own home, but I think it meant a lot to me because I think it adds to the credibility of the talk and the scientific nature of the talk. And I was personally glad because if I'm not allowed to say it, he can.
Right. Right. Yeah. I always I always say to people, because like sometimes people will ask me for like advice and stuff like that, and I always say, listen. I will tell my journey. I will tell my story, but I am not a mental health professional. And I always joke, nor do I play one on TV.
Yeah,
Like I'm
exactly.
not I just talk about my journey, and I like to talk to people that know what they're talking about, because like I'm learning along with everybody else. Like the questions that I ask, are a lot of them are out of genuine curiosity, because I am learning alongside everybody that watches my content and follows me. And um, we talked about how about the neurotypical people, and thinking that sometimes it's overdiagnosed. But I want to go to the other end, right? Because obviously your TEDx talk focuses on enlisting neurotypical people to be a part of the solution, but what would you say to the neurodivergent people like myself, who sometimes feel exhausted from constantly explaining our needs to other people? Like there's times that we do just talk about it, but it's truly it truly is exhausting sometimes. What would you say to neurodivergent people like myself in that regard?
Yeah, I feel you. I honestly can't imagine, because now that I have a sense of the hurdles from within
Yeah.
my own house, I get that you can't add on top of that exhaustion of kind of swimming upstream with wind in your face,
Right.
self-advocacy over and over and over again.
Right.
But this is the why of the talk. And I can tell you, everyone in my house, and I've now, since it's been out for about a month, I've had a number of people reach out to me and say, that's, that's it. And so a lot of people are sending the talk to people in their lives and saying, this explains me. And this explains what I need from you, whether that's a teacher or, a coworker, a boss, or whoever, friend, loved one. This explains me. And honestly, I did not take lightly the responsibility of trying to do justice to an experience I don't have. But I believe the differentiator that I have is I can credibly speak to the neurotypicals and bring the bridge between the two worlds and potentially unleash the unlock between the two worlds, which is the neurotypicals getting in on the action of solving for this. And so if you're a tired neurodivergent, my invitation is, if you feel like the talk has done justice to your lived experience, share it and ensure others are sharing it, because I believe the only solution is in the scaled enough of, you get that tipping point.
Yeah.
If enough of us understand it's not character flaws, there could be another explanation for what I'm seeing. The fix might be small, but maybe the opposite of what I'm trying.
Yeah.
And the ROI is huge. Well, then just think about what's possible. And my goal is to put on my back, since I've got wind in my wind in my back. My life is made easier. The responsibility to enable in a scaled way that awareness to happen. So it's not on your wall.
Right. If you could, hypothetical here, if you could go back in time to a moment before you realized ADHD was at play in your home, if you can go back in time and give yourself advice, what would you say to yourself?
Oof. It's a hard one, because quite honestly, there's a lot of pain associated with um, realizing, in this case, me, I had it wrong and my attempts to help were hurting. And so, it's interesting because everyone has their own parenting philosophy, and we had 4 kids, and our parenting philosophy was something called love and logic, which is that the natural consequences would teach. And so it was kind of, if you get hungry enough, you'll eat.
You're right. Right.
And I now realize my fundamental parenting philosophy would work well for neurotypical children, but wasn't always the right and best intervention for neurodiverse kids. And so that moment, I would go back in time. I would probably buy another book, and adopt a parenting philosophy that better understood the full spectrum of neurodifference. And because I feel it's my responsibility as a parent, and I would say that responsibility is the same whether you're a coach or you're a leader at work or whatever. The job is to bring out the best in your person.
Right.
And I fancy myself as someone who's really, really good at that. And I have a lot of great examples of where I am and was really good at it. But inside my own home, where it mattered most, I had some examples of where my help was hurting. And so if I were to go back in time, it would be in that moment. I would make the penny drop for Kristen, parent, T minus 25 years ago.
All right.
Um, on being more aware of these things. Although I'm not sure in the world we were that aware 25 years ago, which is partly why there's a bit of a lost generation, because I think the children, my children, young adults, they're not getting left behind, which is why I would say for my generation and for, like, say, my mom's generation, it feels like, gosh, where's this coming from? This didn't exist when I was younger. Well, sure it did. We just didn't know. And it's a little baffling if you look at the research, because we've been talking, ADHD has been known about for a long, long time. It's
Hmm.
not a new thing.
Yeah. Right. A lot of people, a lot of people think it's new. A lot of people think
It's
it's a
not,
brand new thing.
yeah,
A lot of people think that. I want to wrap up with us addressing the two main communities uh, that we've been talking about today: the neurodivergent listeners and the neurotypical listeners. I want to start with the neurodivergent listeners who are struggling with feeling like they themselves can't get it together. What is one piece of encouragement or advice that you want them to take away from your TED Talk?
yeah. My TED Talk was a bit cursed because I gave it a year ago, and then the files were corrupted and the talk didn't happen. And so I had to find a new place and give it again. And so
Oh
it's
no. Yeah, yeah. Oh,
from from initial idea to talk on the ground, it was 2 years. And I can tell you, if you've ever done a TEDx talk, all you do is latently think about refining every word and memorizing it.
oh
And
sure. Uh-huh.
so, well, what a relief to have it out in the world and let the real work begin. But after I gave the first one, where the files were corrupted, someone came running up to me and said, I didn't write fast enough in my journal, but I need those words that you use to describe the benefits of ADHD. And it sticks in my heart. Even as I think about it now, what I would say to someone who's neurodivergent is you're misunderstood, because you're being looked at through the lens of a very, very small continuum. And your gifts are in there. We just articulate them wrong. And I would bring back up all of those gifts that are associated with ADHD. And I am well aware of the tension around calling it a superpower, because there is a lot of wind and face, and I'm not calling it a
Right,
superpower
right,
because I understand very well the wind and face. But that's what I want to solve for. I want to start removing the wind so that the good, the reason, it's purposeful. I mean, if you just look at genetics, ADHD is positive. There's a word for it, and I always forget it, but it's getting more and more in our societies also because it's got positive traits, and then it becomes
right.
more and more in people. And so, what I would tell people is, I get you, and help me
Yeah,
help the world to get you,
right,
because I am 100% convinced that today's and tomorrow's problems aren't going to be solved by orderly, dependable, and in control. They're
right,
going to be solved by the people whose brains are different than mine, which is why I'm so passionate about bringing out those gifts and talents.
right, right. So that was for the neurodivergent people. For the neurotypical audience members that are listening who want to do better, um, what are some like things that they can do, like takeaways that they can implement today to be better allies for the neurodivergent community?
Yeah. So I perceive the neurotypical audience to be two groups:
Mhm.
actual neurotypicals
Yeah.
and people who are neurodivergent who aren't aware of neurodivergence.
Right.
And so for the people who are neurodivergent and aren't aware they're neurodivergent, and I'm getting a lot of feedback from people where they're like, whoa, I think you might be talking about me, and maybe I'm not
Yeah.
just bad at humaning.
Yeah.
And so then for those people, I would say, great, why don't you start exploring that? And there's quite a bit of resources out there to help people explore and better understand and see if a diagnosis is appropriate, et cetera. But then they would get the advice that I just gave to
Right.
neurodivergence. For real, true neurotypicals, the orderly, dependable, and in control among us, I would say if you've got 15 minutes, watch the TEDx talk, because it's purposefully constructed to rewire your brain to understand that our understanding of this isn't right, and to give you very concrete things that you can do that take very little from you and have the potential to have a huge return on investment
Yeah.
for the individuals around you, and honestly for our world if we can scale it.
Right. I love that. Like I again, for anybody that's listening right now, whether you're neurotypical or neurodivergent, wherever you fall, If you want to watch or listen to this TEDx talk, I included the link in the description of this podcast. So all you have to do is click on it. Again, it's only 15 minutes. Check it out, because it's definitely something that you'll take something away from it for sure. That you can implement in your life or use it to help educate the people in your life. So that's really, really helpful. What's next for you, Kristen? Like what's next for you? Like any projects, initiatives, follow-ups to your TEDx talk that we should keep an eye out for?
I'm hoping to rest a little bit.
What's that? What is that?
Yeah, what?
Rest? What is that?
It's been really heartening to see the situation in my family go from one of survival to thriving. And I want to bask in every minute of that thriving. And we've collectively agreed, and any stories or anything I share about my family's with their agreement. And I think that's important to note. We've agreed that as a family, we want to pay forward what we've learned. And so I still have to figure out how to scale, Kristen, because for everyone who watches the talk, I can't respond to an email about exactly what you should do in your situation next. And I hate that I can't, but I have a big job and 5 people in my house other than me.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out what are the unlocking moves to scale what I've learned to enable this idea to hit the world. Because I'd like, on my time on this earth, to leave a legacy of being someone who helped unlock the understanding of neurodiversity and enabled a much more brain-friendly environment where there's a lot less need to try to survive and a lot less opportunity to thrive.
Right. I love it. And I appreciate you telling your story. I appreciate you and your family just being so open and honest, because there's going to be a lot of people that listen to this that are going to be like, oh, my journey feels valid now, and that's a really important thing in our community. So I really do appreciate that more than you'll ever know. So really, honestly, thank you. Kristen, thank you for your time. Thank you for your insight. Thank you for sharing this information and your journey. And I hope that everybody that's listening or watching right now is able to take something from it. I know that I have personally, and I think that other people have as well. So I want to thank my guest, Kristen Pressner, for joining us today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your we're recording. This will go out on a Monday, but we're recording this on a Saturday. What's the weather like by you right now?
You would be jealous that you're not in Switzerland right
Oh
now. It
no,
is
I need to go to
gorgeous.
Fiji. I need to go to
Yeah,
Fiji. You
go to
mentioned
Fiji.
Fiji. I'm going to Fiji. I'm gonna write my boss this week and be like, hey, I'm working from Fiji this week. I'm not even gonna ask. I'm just gonna go. You
And
know.
as an HR executive, I wish you good luck with that.
Yeah, it's not gonna work out in my favor. I can tell you that.
Exactly.
And that's a wrap on this week's episode of the Vibe with Kai podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that you found a little bit of comfort in today's episode, and I hope that you're walking away with a little bit of encouragement, and I hope that you laughed a little bit along the way. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like and subscribe and leave a review. Let me know what you thought of the episode. I really want to hear your voice. I want to hear your story. I want to hear all about your journey. Let's keep the conversation going. Make sure you follow me on all of your favorite social media platforms. Follow me on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, whatever it may be, at The Vibe with Kai for more tips, more laughs, and more real talk. Remember, my friends, you are not alone on this journey. We are in this together. And until next time, stay kind to yourself, embrace the journey, and keep vibing. I'll catch you next time. Much love. Good vibes.